Hi, this is Boki, and today for Not My Thesis, I wanted to do just like a really quick video on self-care. I feel like this is a thing that I've seen a lot of people kind of try to process over the past few weeks, probably for very obvious reasons. There's a lot of shit happening and it seems like it's all happening very quickly, and it feels like you kind of constantly need to be plugged in, but then the more you're plugged in to keep up with the news, the more like anxiety and frustration I think we all feel. And Vanessa from Split Reads, she had a video up that I'll link to below where she kind of listed out some of the questions that I think she was asking herself about what it means to read for fun in times like these, where it almost feels indulgent to be doing things that you enjoy when it kind of feels like the world is sort of falling apart. It just becomes very convoluted to try to wrap your mind around, like, what do you do when, like, you don't know if you're allowed to have fun? What does taking care of yourself look like in times like these? And I think that, like, in a more microscopic, less end of the world kind of way, grad school is the perfect preparation for these kinds of conversations, because I think like when you're doing your PhD, when you're working on a dissertation, there is this constant mindset, there's this mindset that is so prevalent and so easy to slip into, that if you're not doing your work 24/7, like, you're doing something wrong. That if you are not on as a scientist, as a researcher, if you do things for fun, like, that's time you should be spending in lab. Like, if you're in lab, you should be doing your work. If you're not in lab, you should be thinking about your work. And that's a really great way to get burnt out. It's a really great way to, like, fuck yourself over mentally. It's a great way to lose interest in the field that you're doing. I think it's something that we all have to learn to balance, and I think there are different balances that work for different people. For me, I went through kind of an extended crisis sort of like halfway through, where I was like, I need to figure out what the balance is for me. And I think figuring out what self-care meant to me was a huge part of that. And luckily, I think the idea of self-care is something that's becoming more prevalent online, and like in online conversations that I've seen. One of the podcasts that I really like, Another Round, the hosts Hebden and Tracy talk a lot about self-care. They talk about it a lot in terms of being women of color and what it means for them to take care of themselves, especially when it kind of feels like the world is maybe not especially when it feels like taking care of yourself is in some ways its own radical kind of act. And I think these conversations, they did a really good job of helping me start to process that taking care of myself is okay. But I think what took a longer time, and in some ways for me didn't really come until I sort of understood the root of my issues with anxiety and depression, was what's the difference between self-care and me using self-care as an excuse to engage in indulgent behaviors that are actually helping me avoid the things that are causing me further stress. So for example, you can see like spending a Saturday on the couch all day watching TV as, like, you know, something that you do to relax. If you've had a really hard week, taking some time, potentially the whole day, to like binge watch a show can sometimes be really good for you. But I think what's really hard is then kind of the opposite extreme, where instead of just using it like as a 1 or 2 day crutch to like kind of, you know, relax, or even just like watching a few episodes every evening, like when you start to turn to something like TV to completely suck up your time and avoid the things that you actually need to work on. And so that might be something like making a phone call that I really have to make, like instead just spending all day in front of the TV, and at the end of the day you're filled with all the self-loathing because you never actually made that phone call, like that kind of thing. The other thing that I had to start to figure out is that self-care is not necessarily things that are fun. There are things that you do to take care of yourself that you don't necessarily want to do, but that will actually make you feel better. So, you know, cleaning your house, like, you don't want to, like, that's not the same as watching TV, but it is something that, at least for me, like, putting things away, creating like a space that I'm enjoying being in, is something that actually makes a huge difference for my happiness and just like my sense of well-being. So I think what I'm maybe getting at is that the two most important things for me with self-care are generosity and honesty. I think the generosity is obvious. Like, especially in the context of like freaking out about the potential demise of the system of government you've grown up with since you were born. You know, it's okay to take time away from that. It's okay to take a few hours where you're not checking the news constantly and just saying like, whatever, if I take an hour break, like, the news will still be there when I return. There are gonna be other people who read and write and tweet about the news, and it's fine to take a step back and let them do that work. And when you come back, just come back with like a refreshed mentality. Like, of course, it's gonna be instantly destroyed once you find out the newest bullshit, but taking that break will leave you in a better position post that new round of bullshit than if you hadn't taken that break at all. But for however long that we're going to have to deal with this, I think there also needs to be that sense of honesty where it's not completely okay to step back and say like, I can't handle this like at all, like this probably doesn't affect me, it affects somebody else more than it does me. Like, I don't think it's going to be okay to completely step back either and say like, it doesn't matter, like I shouldn't watch the news, nothing's gonna happen, like all of this shit is gonna happen. Like, staying engaged is actually, for me, a big part of resisting the bullshit that this country is being subjected to. And so I think with that, it's important to make sure you're not using self-care like as more of a misnomer to excuse away behaviors that will let you, you know, just completely ignore what's going on either. So I don't know, I think it's one of those balances that everyone has to kind of figure out for themselves. It's something that I'm glad that I started to figure out a few years ago, because it's definitely come in handy the past few weeks. And everything that's happening, every tweet that is sent out, I can feel the stress like right here. Like, it's specifically reserved for American democracy, apparently. With that, I thought I would leave like a short list of some of the things that I've done in the past few weeks to take care of myself. Started making myself go to bed at 11 every night. I've been forcing myself to go to the gym in the morning, which is my preferred time to work out, and it's a lot easier to do when you do the other thing where you make yourself go to bed earlier. Marathoned all of The Good Place while analyzing some data. I started making myself shut off Twitter around 10 p.m. around each day. I listen to Pod Save America and Pod Save the World as kind of my take a step back and get some more perspective on what's going on. Clean my apartment to the Moana soundtrack. I've been watching Yuri on Ice. I've been obsessing over All the Birds in the Sky. Romance novels. Oh yeah, romance novels are basically what got me past my initial post-election funk, and they are still helping me now. I learned how to completely make ramen noodles from scratch this weekend. I've been hanging out with friends and talking about politics. I have also been hanging out with friends and not talking about politics. So thank you for watching. Tell me below like what you guys are doing to take care of yourselves. Like I said, like I know this wasn't necessarily the most fleshed out like thesis on what self-care is, but I'm curious about how different people see it, because I think it's such a personal thing, but it's so helpful to talk about. It's helped me to kind of talk out loud and figure out what other people consider self-care, and I would love hearing more from other people. So yeah, I hope the next week is better for everyone, and yeah, bye.